Hello, everyone, and welcome to my website, Born in Hell. And this is the third video in the series that I'm doing, and just talking about mainly my life growing up abused as a child in an abusive and a very dysfunctional home. And I really am just doing this for information purposes, just for anybody who's interested in my story, and really just to be a voice for all the survivors out there whose voices have been silenced. You know, there's untold millions of survivors of people that actually survived abuse and then went to their graves, never having told anyone about the abuse, never having disclosed to anyone that they were abused, just suffering in silence. There's been untold millions of children killed because of abuse around the world. And right now there's millions of children being abused all around the world. And I just wanted to be one more voice speaking out here about what we know is incredibly wrong and what society refuses to pay attention to and dismisses it away many times as a discipline or a family problem or a disciplined problem child. And, you know, this is absolutely unacceptable. And this is why I do what I do. I used to volunteer with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children as the Canada Regional Director for a little while, and that was a great role, and I did enjoy doing it. I love being a voice, and now I have co-founded a project with Donna M. Shear and Lee Roberts, and both of those ladies are down in the States. They're my sisters in Christ, and we have our own not-for-profit, Advocates United for Humanity, standing up against violence against anyone. Our main focus is, of course, violence against children. And so, because they are helpless, they are absolutely vulnerable. And if somebody doesn't step in and do the right thing and get those children some help, you know, they're going to suffer and they're possibly going to die. And we know this. We know this to be true. So I just am doing a series of videos here really about my story. It's a lot of it detailed in, like I was saying in my last video, if you want to go back and watch those, Life of Death or Redemption. It was just an overall look at what was going on in the home at the time, from my eyes, really, starting from the age of 13 and then kind of working back and working forward. I wanted to do the years 5 through 6. When I was 5 and 6 years old, I thought I'd talk about that tonight. And there was a lot of problems in the home at that point. I did talk about the years from the womb to 4 years old last time. And now tonight I kind of want to just take a look at 5 to 6 and what was happening in the home at that time. It was a lot of the same old thing that was happening from womb to 4 years, which was a lot of domestic violence, a lot of abuse. My parents were always fighting and still continued to fight, kept it up really all the way through my adult life into their senior years, very senior years. And there was the same issues were going on when I was 5 and 6. I was older. I was more cognitive of what was going on. Started to see, that there was some real problems going on in the home. And my dad was attempting suicide at that point. And that's when I started to notice, because the family would talk about it and they would have to go and save him, because he would try to kill himself on the freeway, running down the freeway. And he would also try to kill himself in the car. And one time he had a big old station wagon, a big green, kind of teal blue station wagon. And that was kind of popular in those days. And with a big family, you kind of needed something like that. And so he used to drive like a crazy man. But anyway, one time my sister, I was young, so I would have probably been 5 years old. It was probably around 5. My sister would have been 10. Kathy, she was the next up from me. And my dad took us for a ride out through the canyon in New Mexico, outside of Albuquerque. There's a canyon called Tijeras Canyon up in the mountains. And he took us for a ride. I don't remember this ride. But my sister said that he tried to drive us over the cliff, and he was threatening to drive us over the cliff with him in a murder-suicide. And my sister, of course, panicked and freaked out. He stepped on the brakes at the last minute, and the car didn't go over the edge, which is great. And he made the right decision there, and he drove home. But my sister told my mom, And then my mom didn't want us going anywhere in the car with him by ourselves anymore. And but if she was in the car, we were still going with her in the car. And they were absolutely insane at this point. You know, they would fight in the car while my dad was driving. My mom would be cursing my dad. My dad would be slapping my mom. He'd be driving like literally 100 miles an hour down the road. This is back in the days when all those old vehicles were V8s, you know, V8 engines, super powerful vehicles. And, you know, they'd be screaming and cursing at each other. You know, they would always take me to go with them grocery shopping. Probably because they didn't want to leave me at home with the older siblings because they probably wouldn't watch me. Because my older brothers were doing a lot of drugs at this point. Between when I was 5 and 6 years old, my siblings, my older brothers, were using a lot of drugs and smoking a lot of marijuana, a lot of pot in the house. And I'm sure that my mother didn't appreciate that. She let them do that because it was a way to get back at my dad. That's what I was talking about in the last video there, that my mom kind of used her sons, used all of us actually when she needed to, um, for different reasons. In just to malign her relationship and continue to malign her relationship with my dad, with her husband. And so, you know, she allowed my brothers to drop out of school at very young ages. She didn't make them cut their hair. My dad was always kind of running them down because they had long hair and they weren't going to school. And my dad, of course, was already violent towards them and already beating on them. And my mom would be like, you know, they can have their hair however they want, and you're not going to tell them how to wear their hair. And if they don't want to go to school, they don't have to. So my brothers dropped out of school, did a lot of drugs, were hanging around the house with a lot of different people. There was all kinds of young teens hanging around in the front yard, partying and passing out. And my dad, of course, did not like this. And a lot of really bizarre stuff going on at this time when I was 5 and 6 years old. I remember a lot of it actually. Um, my dad was what he one time I remember this. So we were driving, just me and my dad. This was before the suicide attempt thing because my mom wouldn't let me go anywhere with him after that. But this would have been just before that. And we were driving down the road, and my dad said, "Let's me and you leave your mother and go to California, and we'll move, and we'll just me and you. We'll go to California. We'll get away from your crazy mother." Because my mother was always yelling at me. If she wasn't yelling at me, she was hitting me. If she wasn't hitting me, she was threatening to hit me. It was a very volatile relationship. I did not have a good relationship with my mother. It wasn't my fault. I was like 4 years old. My mom didn't want a little kid around, and my sister Kathy was always playing at her friend's house. She was very smart. She was always out of the house. Normally, she was out of the house quite often. She rarely came home to even eat. And I think my mom liked it that way because she didn't have to worry about her. She was gone. But I was too young, and I was at home, and it wasn't a good idea. And to be there by myself, I was like kind of a sitting duck and a target for my mom's abuse, mainly my mom's abuse. My dad a little bit here and there, but mostly my mom. And so my dad said, he said, "Let's just me and you take off and we'll leave your crazy mother." And I was like, I told him, I said, "I'll jump out of the car. I'll jump out of the car." I was ready to open the door and roll out onto the pavement, onto the highway. Because I was like, okay, mom beats me and she mistreats me, but dad's crazy. And I'm not going to California with my dad. So this is the kind of situation I grew up in. We used to, like I was saying, my parents used to take me to the grocery store with them. And they used to fight through the store. And my mom always bought like 2 carts worth of food because there was 5 kids in the home, plus the 7 people total in the house. And growing boys, lots of, they'd need food. So my mom never withheld food or anything like that. And so she always loaded up the groceries. My mom was a big woman herself. My dad was over 6 feet tall, probably around 6'5". My mom was 6 feet tall. She was 5'11". She weighed about 300 pounds. My dad weighed about probably 250. My mom outweighed my dad by a few pounds just from being overweight. But she was very, very tall, very big, very large woman, and she liked to eat. And that was kind of probably one of her only things that she got any sort of satisfaction out of in that, was that she could eat. And which, she did. And she used to cook, and she'd made food. And, if you weren't there to get the food, then you didn't get any because she wasn't going to be recooking things. But she made food. We got to eat, and we weren't starved or anything like that. But it was always a little dangerous to be around her, where whatever room she was in. So you had to take your chances going to the kitchen with her because you never know what would be flying at you. Plates of food, plates of hot food, cups of coffee, hot coffee, cold coffee. It didn't matter. If I spilled my milk in the morning, I'd get a beating for spilling my milk. Things like this. She was vicious. She was very vicious, and you know, it was just a horrific situation. But we'd be at the grocery store and walking along, and I don't know where I developed this habit, but I developed a bad habit of doing things like being very destructive with stuff. So I would poke holes in the meat packages, like the hamburger packs, poking holes. I would poke holes in all the toilet paper rolls as I'm walking by, just kind of destructive because I was always walking behind them, right? And sometimes I'd be pushing a cart. So there'd be an extra cart. I'd be pushing a cart, my dad would be pushing a cart, my mom would be pushing a cart, or my mom would be putting stuff in the cart, whatever. And this is just how twisted I was when I grew up. I wasn't shown how to behave properly, and saw my parents hurting each other. And so what do I do? And what comes in my mind is to hurt my dad. So I took the grocery cart and I used to ram him with it if I was right behind him. And I'd literally ram the back of his legs with it. And then he'd take me out in the parking lot and beat my ass out in public. And that was kind of, people would say, well, maybe you deserved that. Actually, I was shown how to misbehave. And then when I did misbehave, I was beaten for it. So it's kind of like, here, we're going to show you how to behave. We're going to show you how to be violent and how to hurt people. But then when you do, you're going to pay for it, which is a lot of the problems that were going on in our home. But that's just the sort of thing. I mean, then on the way home from the grocery store, my parents would fight every time. I mean, it was a horrible situation. And they would scream and curse at each other. And I used to actually, I was 5 years old, right around 5, 6 years old. And I used to think that these two people could not possibly be my parents. There's no way. I thought that I was kidnapped by these two people. And this was in my mind, that I was kidnapped. And I would lay on the ground in the bottom of the because it was scary. My dad would be driving down the road, bombing down the road, punching my mother, and my mom would be like hitting him back, and they'd be fighting and driving like a crazy, oh, it was insane. And I'd be freaking out in the back seat, but I wasn't allowed to say anything, so I just keep my mouth shut. And I actually thought I was kidnapped by these crazy people, right? But no, they were my parents, and it turned out to be a real nightmare. So this is sort of the stuff that was going on. It was absolutely horrific. My dad was attempting suicide at this time, and he continued that on for many years. My mom, she just didn't have any patience for me. She didn't have any time for me, you know. And this is my little cat, little Lori. She always wants to be in the video. She's very, very sweet. And we've had her for 10 years. She's my baby. But it was just a couple of years of real craziness around the house. My brother at this time, my brother Chess, um, he had been sentenced to a year in a state penitentiary in New Mexico for a forgery. And at this time, I didn't know why he had to go away. I was too young. I was 5 years old, and my brother, when he was going to prison, he talked to me before he left, and he was like, "You be a good girl." This is my brother Chesley, who I really love. My brother Chess. He was murdered when he was 19, which I'll go into later. But he was a nice guy, and he was always trying to protect my mom. And he used to tell my mom, "You're a person. You do not deserve to be treated this way." He's also the brother that actually stepped in when my dad was going to beat on me, actually, and took the belt away from my dad. And he was kind of the one in the family that would protect people. And I think he was my brother's protector, Rob. He was also his protector. So he got sent away to the penitentiary. But before he left, he would talk to me, and I remember this conversation, believe it or not, today. And he said, "You be a good girl for mom, right? And you behave yourself, and you help her as much as you can, and you protect her as much as you can." I got this from my brother, and I'm like 5 years old, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll do it, you know. And so I kind of felt like I needed to take on that role as well, to be my mom's protector. Even though my mother was my main abuser and was the one that was responsible for most of the abuse towards me, I just knew what was going on was wrong. And my dad was still raping my mother. He was still attempting to rape her. And as a matter of fact, since I'm talking about years 5 to 6 here, when I was 6 years old, my dad raped my mother in front of me. And it was nighttime. He did not know I was on the couch in the other couch in the room. We had because it was so many people. It was a 2-bedroom house, first of all, tiny little house with all these people in there, and people sharing rooms. My mom would not sleep with my dad because that's why he was raping her all the time, because she wasn't sleeping with him. And so the boys all had one room. Me and my sister had the other room, and my dad, I think he had the garage. I think there was like a little bedroom out in the garage or something. I don't know. And my mom was on the couch in the living room. And this one particular night, my sister had a friend come over from down the street. She came over to spend the night. And so I got the couch across from my mother. So my dad did not realize that I was there. And he raped my mother in front of me with me knowing about it. My mom was telling him, stop, Lori's right there. He wasn't paying attention. You know why? Because he was too busy raping her, right? And this is the kind of stuff that we grew up with. This is the stuff that when people want to sit there and say, was it really that bad? You know, you know, yes, it really was. And worse. It was a horrific situation. I mean, I knew what my dad was doing was wrong. And my mom could have got help, and she didn't get help. It's like she was shackled. She was shackled in her mind because social services had already stepped in. All she had to do was make a call. And maybe we would have been removed for a while, until they could get things straightened out. But no, she didn't get any help. She was shackled in her mind. She was tied down and shackled to this man, and it was just horrific. So my brother, back to the story with my brother, he went to the penitentiary for a year. And we used to go and see him in the penitentiary. I remember going to the pen to see my brother. And I was just a little girl. And I used to love to go see him because he was everybody's favorite brother, really, to be honest with you. Everybody just loved him. And then in the meantime, my parents went bankrupt. So my mom had stored some stuff at the neighbor's place, which we didn't have much. Coming from Canada down to the States with not much. My dad made minimal kind of pay. My mom wasn't working at this time. And, the money was tight. And so my parents went bankrupt. They had bought this little tiny house. And, but they didn't take the house. They didn't take the house away from them. But they did come and actually remove stuff out of the house. And I remember when they did this. They came and took stuff. So my dad at this point decided that we all needed that he needed to move to Canada, and he needed to move to British Columbia, to BC, Vancouver to be exact. So when my brother Chess came out of the penitentiary after that year of being there, we all packed up. I was just 6, just turning 7, and headed north to British Columbia, Vancouver, which my parents had never been there. My parents were from the opposite side of Canada, which is Nova Scotia. And so why my dad thought that we all needed to go to Vancouver, I really don't know. But he sold the house out from underneath my mother. My mother did not want to go. She wanted to stay right where she was. She had made friends on the block. She liked the people there. She liked living there. She didn't like her life with her husband, but at least there was some sense of sanity for her there. And she did not want to be moving 2,000 miles north to Vancouver. And so my dad sold the house out from under her. So she was angry, very, very, very angry about this move. And because that was the only security that they had was this little house, that they could have eventually sold for, fix it up a little bit, sell it for more money, like, move in real estate. But No, my dad didn't want to do that. So my mom's like, I'm 6 years old. She's 44 and stuck in this miserable, rotten situation with this man who was just determined to ruin her life. I mean, he did not care. He did not consult her. He didn't ever, they were not a team. They didn't do anything together as a team. And so she was very, very, very unhappy about this move because now we're a carload of people with no house, nowhere to go, no job. My dad had a job kind of waiting for him, I guess, up in BC, just a regular job like he had in New Mexico, nothing special, and with no house. So after my brother got out of the penitentiary, we all packed up and said goodbye to the neighbors and moved, you know, up to New Mexico. I mean, up to Vancouver in British Columbia. So we left New Mexico. But just before we left, we had this. I just remember doing this. We had this school project where we had to draw our house and our family. And I remember drawing this, and actually had this for a long, long time afterward. I don't know how we managed to save it, but we did. And I drew this picture of this house and all of the stick figures of the family, all there, mom, dad, all the brothers, the sister, everybody's there, and we're all crying. And the teacher was like, wow, this is a nice picture. She's like, but you're all crying. I mean, why is everybody so sad? And I was like, our family's just sad. We cry, like that was me. That was me just realizing at the age of like 6 years old that this was a really, really sad, horrible situation. And in the meantime, I'm a little kid trying to have fun, I mean, I'd make mud pies out in the yard, you know, um, playing with dolls, playing with any toys that I had. I did have some toys. My parents actually did buy me some toys. I like to play with my sister's toys, which would get me in trouble with my older sister. But, I mean, we had some toys and things. I like to play. I was like a normal kid in that respect. And I had a few little friends. My friend down the street, Arlene, and a couple little friends. But it was just I was very much not growing up properly and wasn't developing properly mentally, emotionally, had a lot of emotional problems, had a lot of emotional tics already by this point. I felt very different from everybody else. I felt different from the kids in the school. I recognized that at a very young age, that I was very much different from them. And just realizing that this was just going to be a weird experience. When we did pack up to move to Vancouver, I was excited about the move. I didn't want to leave my friend behind, my friend Arlene, because she was my best friend. But I was also very excited about the move because I was thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. And I remember the rest of the family was just bawling and crying and very miserable and unhappy. My mom was cursing and screaming, and slapping anybody who just happened to get in her way, which was me most of the time. My sister knew how to avoid her. For some reason, I wasn't that smart. And it was a bad situation. And but we all packed up and moved, all except for my sister Irene, because she was already moved out with her, husband and had children. And by this time, they were living in California. And my brother Kevin, who was just kind of roaming around northern, like, well, in probably British Columbia at this time, sort of where we were headed, Vancouver way, Vancouver, BC. And so we moved up there for one summer, and that was it was right around turning 6, 7 years old, and it was a weird time. Let me tell you, I was 6 actually, and we only lived there for 3 months, and during this time we lived in a hotel. It was like a motel for kind of like a bunch of immigrants lived there actually from all over the world. There was people from Scotland there. There was people from, Czechoslovakia, people from the Ukraine. I mean, it was like this big melting pot, this like hotel motel type place on Kingsway Road. And it was like cockroaches running around, and I was sleeping on the floor because all of us were in this like little 2-room hotel room staying like for, I don't know, a month there anyway. So there was nowhere for me to sleep, so I was just on the floor because my mom and my sister had the bed. And there was obviously no room for me in the bed, even though I was a tiny little stick little thing. If you ever get to see a little pictures of me at that age, I was very, very, very tiny and very, very skinny at that point. Have never been that skinny or tiny ever since, but I was at that time. And there was room for me on the bed there, but no, I slept on the floor with the cockroaches running all over me. And what are you going to do? You know, at this point, my mom she was so mad about being in Vancouver. She was so pissed off and angry. My brothers were going around finding drug dealers and getting pot and probably hawking her jewelry in order to do it. And, you know, it was just an insane time. You know, my mom had no patience, very, very easily flying off the deep end, you know, as far as her patience levels with me went. She was threatening to kill me. She was threatening to beat the crap out of me on a regular basis. My brothers would tell her, "You have to calm down. She's a little girl. She just wants to have fun. Let her go and play with the kids over there." My mom was just like, you know, just vicious towards me at this point because I was an easy target, you know. And so my dad was working at this point, and we moved from the hotel place to a rented house that was just renting for the summer because the people had gone away. And so we stayed in this awesome, awesome house that I've never lived in another house like it ever. And we were there for 2 months, and that's the best house I've ever lived in my lifetime. It was awesome. It had 6 or 7 bedrooms. It had a downstairs playroom with a pool table. It had like a double garage. This was a beautiful house, the nicest house I'd ever been in. And we were there for 2 months. My parents did the best they could to not trash it while we were there. And we watched the pets. There was a lot of pets there, so we were in charge of the pets while we were there. And then my brother got busted for marijuana charges at Stanley Park, and he got arrested. So my dad, this was my brother Rob, not my brother Rob, my brother Howard, who was 7 years older than me. So I would have been, he'd have been 13. So my dad freaked out, quit his job, and said, "We're all packing up and we're all going back to New Mexico." My mom was like, "You've got to be kidding me. We just sold our house for a van, for the price of a van. My dad sold our 10,000. My dad sold our house, my mother's house and his house for a 10,000 for 10,000 bucks. The house was worth 10,000, but he got out of it a van and a couple $1,000s. That's it." So my mom's like, "So now we have a van and no money, and you don't even have a job to go back to, and we have no house, and you want to move back to New Mexico?" This is the insanity that we were living with, and it got incredibly bad from here on out. It was already really bad before that, but it just continued to spiral down, and it was just more hell, more hell, more hell. We moved back down to New Mexico into another hotel for a while on Central Avenue, Tewa Lodge. And we were there for about a month, probably, a couple months. And my dad, I'm not sure if he's got his old job back or a new job. I don't even know at this point. But he started working again. And we moved to this other house that was just a few blocks from where we lived before, about 2.5 blocks away, within walking distance. And it was on Indian School Road, and I call that Hell House. That was Hell House. It was a house of hell for me. And I will continue on. We'll leave this right here. I'll pick up years. This was 5 and 6. I'll pick up 7 and 8 next time. And so, you know, I just tell people, you know, if you're struggling, if you're a survivor, a lot of survivors of abuse listen to my stuff. And, you know, a lot of people listen to my stuff. I really appreciate everybody who's taking the time to listen and to follow my work. I really appreciate it. And, you know, if you're struggling and you're having a hard time, like I say on all of my shows, you have to do the right thing. You have to reach out and get some help. You have to make a phone call. You have to let somebody know you're struggling. Do not struggle on your own. Do not allow your past to destroy you. I mean, you deserve so much better. We all do. We all did. You make sure that you reach out, you get some help, and do not be destroyed by your past. And get the help and the care that you need. And until next time, hopefully another, well, I'm not sure when I'll be doing another one, but it won't be too long because I would like to hurry up and get these done. And I appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody, for sharing my work, for everything you do to make a difference in this world, to stop child abuse, to protect children, and for everything that you do to help a survivor out, a survivor of abuse as a friend, for everything that you do to make this world a better place. God bless you all, and God keep you till the next time. Bye bye.